Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden told Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that Washington will not abandon Kyiv in its fight against Russia, even as the Republicans signaled opposition to extending U.S. war funding. The Kremlin echoed Republican arguments, scoffing at the impact of the U.S. support. Standing alongside the Ukrainian leader at a White House press conference, Biden said, and I'm quoting him here, "I will not walk away from Ukraine, and neither will the American people." The U.S. president warned against allowing a Ukrainian defeat. Take a listen.
Mr. President, I'll not walk away from Ukraine. The American people can be and should be incredibly proud of the part they played in supporting Ukraine's success. We'll continue to supply Ukraine with critical weapons and equipment as long as we can, including $200 million I just approved today in a critical needed equipment, additional air defense interceptors, artillery, and ammunition. But without supplemental funding, we're rapidly coming to an end of our ability to help Ukraine respond to the urgent operational demands that it has. Putin is banking on the United States failing to deliver for Ukraine. We must prove him wrong.
Well, Zelensky, who spent the morning talking to Republicans and Democrats in Congress, signaled cautious optimism that the stalled U.S. aid will restart. Take a listen.
Вони були більш ніж позитивні, але ми знаємо, що є слова, а є конкретний результат. Ми будемо count on the great result. Thank you.
The United Front at the White House contrasted with growing division up on the Capitol Hill. Leading Republican leaders are insisting that renewing Ukraine aid will depend on Democrats first agreeing to major immigration reforms. Well, they are even questioning whether the war against Russian invasion should continue. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson expressed very little enthusiasm for approving Biden's request for $60 billion in new assistance. Moscow, meanwhile, claimed fresh battlefield advances and predicted that any new assistance for Kyiv would be a fiasco.
What the Biden administration seems to be asking for is billions of additional dollars with no appropriate oversight, no clear strategy to win, and none of the answers that I think the American people are owed. I have also made very clear from day one that our first condition on any national security supplemental spending package is about our own national security first. The border is an absolute catastrophe, and this is because of the policies of this White House and this administration.
Republican Senator J.D. Vance, close to the party's leader and likely 2024 presidential candidate Donald Trump, said that Zelensky was gross for pressuring the Senate. Russia said it was pressing ahead on the ground just as Ukraine's freezing winter deepens and Moscow's air attacks on Ukrainian cities increase. Well, Ukraine said that Russia had launched a massive offensive with armored vehicles in another part of the front near Advitka in the east. In a blow felt by the civilians behind the front lines, Ukraine's main operator said that it had been paralyzed by a powerful hacker attack. Well, U.S. said that Moscow is paying an extraordinary price for small gains, with some 315,000 Russian troops killed or wounded in Ukraine since the war began in 2022. According to a declassified U.S. intelligence assessment, Russians have also lost some 2,200 of the 3,500 tanks that they had before the start of the war. The White House said that Russia had suffered more than 13,000 dead and wounded in the east of Ukraine since October. National Security Council spokesperson said that Russia seems to believe that a military deadlock through the winter will drain Western support for Ukraine. As the U.S. ponders its future Ukraine policy, the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk called for full mobilization on the part of the free world, the West, in support of Ukraine.
Będziemy, i liczę tutaj na współpracę wszystkich sił politycznych, głośno i zdecydowanie domagać się pełnej mobilizacji wolnego świata, świata Zachodu na rzecz pomocy Ukrainie w tej wojnie. Nie ma dla takiego myślenia żadnej alternatywy.
Well, some experts view the Russia-Ukraine war as a manifestation of the renewed geopolitical rivalry between major world powers in today's time.
Министерство, ведомство, управление делами обратилось с просьбой закупки продолжить и сделать упор на...
And for more on Zelensky's Washington visit, we are now being joined by Lester Munson, Senior Fellow, National Security Institute, Principal International at BGR Group. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us on WION, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Now, this is the Ukrainian president's third visit to Washington, D.C. since the war began. What was different this time? What were some of the key highlights of Zelensky's meet with Biden?
Well, first, I think it's important to note that President Zelensky met with all of the key folks in Washington, from the president to the speaker, both parties in Congress, in the House and the Senate. He really acquitted himself quite well, did a good job of making his case. What's different this time is that Congress is tying aid to Ukraine to changes in U.S. border policy. Now, in fairness to congressional Republicans, some of this was included in President Biden's request to Congress for the assistance. He asked for aid to Ukraine, aid to Israel, aid to Taiwan, and also assistance for the U.S. border. So congressional Republicans are asking for some changes in border policy before they're willing to approve aid to Ukraine. That is a slight difference.
Right, I was just coming to that the aid for Ukraine has been in a deadlock in the Congress over the border security issue. The questioning is, why is U.S. border security issue tied with this aid for Ukraine?
Well, there are many people in this country, in the United States, who believe that there is a major crisis at the border, the southern border of the United States, the border with Mexico, where migrants are coming across at a rate of about 8,000 a day. It's really massive numbers, historically very, very high. And there's a lot of concern. It's not just Republicans. It's not just the border states like Texas and New Mexico and Arizona. It is also northern cities, New York, Chicago, Boston, where a lot of these immigrants, migrants, refugees are ending up. There's a real sense of crisis in the United States that there's a real problem at the border. There's a lot of voters, and their views are largely reflected with Republicans, who don't want to start solving problems abroad until problems are also being solved here in the United States. So that has led to a real push to tie changes in border policy to aid to Ukraine.
Right, Mr. Munson, apart from the border security issues, the senators are also asking questions regarding accountability for U.S. aid to Ukraine. Do you think that the number of corruption cases in Ukraine, is that playing a role in the obstruction of aid to Ukraine as it fights its war with Russia?
That's a good question. There certainly is a corruption issue in Ukraine. There always has been, and it is possible that some of the assistance is affected. Frankly, I don't view that as a real material issue in terms of U.S. assistance to Ukraine. That assistance is actually monitored very closely. There are audits, there are reviews. There's a lot of careful attention to make sure the money is spent in the right way. So I'm not sure that's the most important issue when it comes to spending the money effectively. You did cite Speaker Johnson earlier saying he's got concerns about the plans of the administration and how they're going to bring this war to a conclusion. There are some legitimate concerns in Congress that the Biden administration is not providing serious enough weaponry to the Ukrainians to actually win the war, that the administration is holding back some of these missile systems and jet fighters that could actually give Ukraine a real advantage.
Right, let's also, Mr. Munson, talk about what Biden exactly said. Now, Biden said that U.S. will support Ukraine as long as we can. That's what he said this time when he met Zelensky. Do you think this comment represents a subtle but noteworthy shift in public messaging from Biden, who earlier said that U.S. will support Ukraine for as long as it takes?
It could be. It's unclear to me. The important thing here is that President Biden is right now engaged, and his staff, they're right now engaged in negotiations with congressional Republicans over these border change policies. They're working very hard to get to a compromise that will satisfy both Democrats and Republicans on border issues. This is a very difficult thing to do, there's no doubt. But that is the thing that is happening right now. If that effort is successful, we are going to see Congress authorize new assistance for Ukraine. If that effort is unsuccessful, then it is very unlikely that Congress is going to provide more money for Ukraine. So that's the real issue here, is how that negotiation between the president and the U.S. Congress is going.
Right, my last question to Mr. Munson. U.S. is less than a year away from elections. Do you think politics is playing a part in all of this?
Politics is always playing a part in stuff like this. In this case, Republicans are trying to respond to their voters. Democrats are trying to respond to their voters. At the same time, both sides are, I believe, of goodwill and trying to do the right thing for the country. That is why they are negotiating on this. I think we need to give them a little grace for a few days to try and come up with a solution here. If that doesn't happen, then there's going to be a lot of political recriminations on both sides, frankly, and I think that would be very unfortunate.
Right, Mr. Munson, we'll wait and have to see how the aid gets through Ukraine. But thanks very much for joining us and WION and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you very much.